Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. You know, Jerry, when in my project management days, what always stuck with me was this statistic. I think it's about 90% of all project success relies on communication, always. And it really, and it could be, just the littlest thing. But if you just go all in and you're doing everything you need to, but you are not communicating it properly, it doesn't matter how much work you put in. It's not going to work.
That is so true. And today, I think it's even tougher because you have to communicate in many different ways. Because
that's
you have
the point.
Meet the need of who you're communicating with. So, and with all these generations of people in a school, that makes a difference too on the kind of communication they like to have. So I am so excited for our guest today. Jamie, Chantel and I have a little backstory. We met and we went to this rooftop just to visit. And we became fast friends, really good friends quickly. I think we were on this rooftop just talking to each other for a couple of hours. And the people we came with couldn't find us. And they were ready to put our faces on milk cartons. They were calling the police looking for us. And there we were just bonding like women do. I'll never forget that night. And actually, isn't that a great lead in on communication? It tells you what a communicator she is. To leave the rest of your group just to visit with her. So awesome. So this is Dr. Chantell Manahan, and I'm so proud of her. Jamie, she is one of those working moms. I think it's 3 boys she has. She leads technology in a district. She got her dissertation and she's written a book. And all of this is in the last maybe 18 months. So much going on in her life.
And she's on the CoSN Board too, right?
She's on the CoSN Board. Absolutely. And she's a leader in her state as well with technology. So Chantell just does it all is what I want to say. And her new book is called Capes Optional. And I have an idea she does have a cape.
She does.
And communication is essential, leading out loud in the era of school choice. So welcome, Chantell. We are so happy to have you on the podcast today. And tell us, are you out of school yet? What's going on in your world right now?
Yes. So I'm in Northeast Indiana, and we are really fortunate that we usually end school pretty early. So we are out of school. It's summer vacation for most of us. We still have summer school going on at our high school. But our elementary summer school is all done, and we had our summer extra iRead testing session is done, and it's time for all those summer projects. So a lot of people think school districts aren't quiet in the summer and everyone's on vacation. And when you're a teacher, sure, summer's off, but you're still doing professional learning. You're still getting ready for next year. You're probably working. Yeah, I worked a second job up until we had our children in the summer. But really still here in our building, there's so much going on. And you both know that ladies like food service is doing our summer breakfast and lunch program at one of our elementary schools all summer long. Our transportation department is busy getting ready for bus inspections and cleaning up all the buses. HR is busy hiring teachers and staff members to all of our buildings. And we're in technology. We're getting ready for new students, new devices. We're preparing for a wireless refresh because summer is the best time to do those projects to get brand access points in all of our classrooms. We always have recycle to pick up. And one of the things I love about summer is I always get to have a couple of recently graduated students to be interns, and they kind of see the backside of everything they've experienced as a student here in our district. So it's been really fun every year to kind of acquaint them with the back end work that makes what they see happen seamless.
Yes. Oh, it is a busy life. And I think technology, especially, they do so much work in the summer because that's the only time when they can get to things and not inconvenience people. And so, yeah, I know people would say, oh, it's summer. It must be an easy time. And I would always say, no, this is part of our hardest time of the year.
Yeah.
So, yes. Well, I hope everything's going well and the refresh and all of that. It's you kind of just keep your fingers crossed till it's done and it works, and then you feel like you can breathe again. So, Chantel, I know that your book came out of your dissertation because we had some conversations about that. But I want to back up to, why did you choose this topic for your dissertation? Because it's a good one, and it's always a topic of concern, no matter what department you're in, like Jamie was saying earlier.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of a funny story. It goes all the way back to my early days of teaching. So some of you all listening might not know that my first job in education was a French teacher, right? So high school French teacher, loved my job, loved teaching French. But when you're the French teacher, you have to really be worried about students enrolling in your class. Students have choices. They could take Spanish instead. They don't have to take a foreign language. I worked in a school and we also had Latin as an option. So 3 options in a small rural school district. I needed to make sure that students were sitting in the seats in my classroom and that they wanted to commit for 2, 3, or 4 years because I wanted to have a job. I didn't really understand that it was marketing or communication. I just knew that I wanted to have a job next year in a full schedule. So I was doing everything I could. I was like a one-woman marketing team. Now that I think about it, I mean, I was designing lessons that infused technology and brought the French-speaking world to the middle of cornfield. We were cooking. We were out visible in the public. I was planning a trip to France with my students during my first year of teaching because I wanted to give them that opportunity. I had like billboards in the hallway, bulletin boards with all. I couldn't even decorate it to say French more than what it looked like at that point. And just meeting as many students as I could, and I was a new teacher to that district, teaching, building relationships with students, ornaments, just communicating with them, right? They're young people, and talking to them, you learn all kinds of things and build relationships and class. So that was kind of my origin story, I guess, if you will, like talking about superheroes. And then I had taught for almost 10 years at my superintendent classroom here at MSK2 Academic District, and asked me if I would think about applying for the technology director role and to come to the central office. And I said, well, I'd love to. I think some things need to change for technology, and as long as you'll support you, for teachers and students, yes, I'll do it. So I started mid-year. It was January, and my second week on the job, I had to do the enrollment counts, the membership report that determines state funding. And as technology director, it was my job to comb through all the data, make sure all the student data was landing at the state correctly, and that we were accounting for every student so we get every dollar, because every student enrolled is a specific dollar amount for the school. And I didn't really understand that as a teacher, that that's how school funding worked. I didn't need to understand that as a teacher. But I had this recollection. I'd just come to teach here in this district. And it was really strange. Every day we had a Post-it note outside our door with the number of students sitting in seats. And I thought, well, that's super strange. Like, why are we doing this? And we did it every day, more than a week. And then it wasn't until I realized why we did this then. We were minus more. We're 2,400 kids now. We were about 2,700. We were minus 100 students that year. And 100 students at more than $5,000 per student is a significant amount of money for our school districts. So teachers didn't get raisins, they get stipends, and nothing that year. And then coming to the central office and being the person in charge of that before, I was like, oh, this is why it's so important. This is why I have to be so careful about the data. I have to make sure that the number of students sitting in seats matches the number of students in the student information system, that every piece of data about them is correct. So then I that for a couple of years, and I started noticing every year we're losing students. Why are we losing students? I didn't have fewer students than last time we had a countdown. So it's really getting really interesting in how are people making these enrollment decisions. Part of it is demographics. How many available students are there who live in your community can come to your school corporation? But part of it is that choices and what's making them choose one school district versus another. I mean, then we just saw that compound, right, with COVID, where it started saying, like, well, maybe homeschool is an option. Maybe a virtual school is an option for my family. So there are just more options for parents than ever before. We also have a really large, extensive voucher system here in Indiana. So I think a family can make a combined income of almost $300,000 here and still be eligible for vouchers. So that's amazing as well. So I just started digging into that as my research. How are families making these choices? Because everyone thinks it's test scores. Everyone thinks it's athletics or those kinds of things. But there's so much more is what I found out.
Ah, what are some of the factors? I'm interested.
So I did both a community survey, and then I also, it was a mixed methods dissertation. So a community survey with all kinds of quantitative data, but then I also interviewed families. I specifically sought out families who live here and send their children here. Okay. Families who live somewhere else and send their children here. And families who live here and send their children somewhere else. So I wanted to make sure that I was representing all of those groups in my interviews where I had a deeper dive. And, what came out of those results were, number one, choice is only an option for really a smaller number of families than what we do. Because when you start talking about choice, that might mean that provided if families can't do that, then the option of another school district close by or using one of those vouchers may not. And then for other families, maybe they don't have a reliable internet connection at home, so maybe virtual school is not out do that.
Yes.
Maybe homeschool's not an option because both parents work. So the pool is smaller than what you would think, at least in my small rural area of families who are making those choices. But also, what they're looking for much more so for this child to be prepared for. Is the child going to be known? Are they going to feel like they belong? The thing that kept surfacing over and over again when people chose our district was our caring staff members. And they had plenty of examples of when teachers or instructional assistants or bus drivers or food service employees went above and beyond to make sure that their child was seen and taken care of and known. And those were the things that made us stay. Those were the things that families said, I'm continuing to choose because you spent time calling to tell me just how important this particular day was for my child and the success they had, or how kind they were, or how they improved someone else. And those were the stories that surfaced over and over again. Very few parents mentioned scores or programs or anything else.
Wow. It makes sense, right? That's all we want for our kids. It's all about heart, really. It's not about all of the, the extras, extra little things. But it's not the fluff. It's what really matters. And I think it may not have been clear going in, right? Because you were so curious to be able to dig into this. But what a revelation. But at the same time, it's almost like it should have been obvious, but it's not.
Right?
Yeah. Especially like as a parent. Because, and it's funny too, when you think about some of the families, if there is something that happens, right? Something that, something drastic. Some of the things that you mentioned were just really subtle things. But if something drastic happens, when a family leaves and what the reason was. And it could have been wonderful up until that very moment. But whatever that trigger was, and it could have been any little thing, that was it. They're out. And sometimes it's not always the kids who are making that decision. Right. Sometimes it's the parents. So I think that's interesting too. And that's where I think communication comes in, because the kid knows all the angles and, may be like, well, but it's the parents who may have missed some things, or not missed, but weren't informed, right?
Yeah, that's something else that I found with the interviews. Even for parents who live here and send their children to school here, we had families who had no idea some of the programs that we offered, or misinformation about, well, we don't offer this, so if we want that, we'll have to go to this other school district. Families couldn't name, they couldn't necessarily name a lot about our school district brand beyond the colors. And so that just puts on us, like, how are we being poor communicators about the value we can add, what programs we offer? Because if parents are interested in those things, if those are differentiating factors, if they don't really exist, they can't include us in it.
Yes. So did you change some practices after you did this work? Have you made some changes?
Well, we have. And I think I was doing my dissertation. We were going through strategic planning. And in our strategic planning, communication came up as one of our areas to improve and work on. And honestly, like a lot of small rural districts around us and across the country, we didn't have someone dedicated to communications at that. When I was writing my dissertation, I was doing my research, and as we were going through this plan. So that meant, in that case, it's everyone's job and it's no one's job. So I became a lot of times the de facto communicator because so many of our communication systems live online, right? The website's online, handling the rostering on parent and family communication tool happens online. So I was trying to do that communications coordinator job or communications director job in addition to being a technology director. Really, that's two people's job. So I'm doing my best. Principals are doing their best. They also want to be communicating with families. Right. The rest of our central office staff are doing their best, but they're doing it on this. That's also because so many people are doing their best to communicate what they can and when they can. There's no cohesive message, and families don't know where to look for specific types of information. And unfortunately, when families don't have answers, or when you're not being clear communicators about yourself, they start filling in the blanks. And usually that story is not the right story, and it's not the story you think about. So you have to do what I learned is you have to do a lot of investment up front, and before you ever need to bank on that trust that you've built. You need communication to build trust with families, to build trust with your and be sharing those things, be celebrating students and staff, be celebrating the win, and be very vocal about it. That can be really difficult for educators, I think. Somehow we think it's publicity, it's a little uncomfortable, marketing seems a little so that sometimes is a barrier that gets in our way, that we don't want to be telling our own story or tooting our own horn or brag or we seem like we're bred. And I think we have to get out of our own way, because being visible and transparent with your communication, visible to your parents and to your community, it's not really about vanity or I want to be an influencer. It's really a leadership responsibility to make sure that people know what you're about, what you stand for, how you serve your community, and how you serve your students.
Such a good point. It really is. It really is. There is that fine line between being braggadocious and really just communicating. And it's probably just that nuance that makes the difference. And it could be just a simple thing. It doesn't have to be, redoing all the work that you did for the communication. So you made the data. I always say data is transformative, but it's also meaningless, right? Mm-hmm. It's only transformative when you are using it. But if you're not using it, then it's worthless, right? So now that you've done all of that, you've taken all of that, you created a spot for this person. So now you don't have all of these different types of messaging. You don't have different focus points of each. There's a single voice and a funnel now that it goes through. So what has the impact been?
So by creating that position, the brand guides, and all of those things, and inviting our principals and our teachers to help in the storytelling, but funneling that through that 1% who can kind of see an increase in our followers across our social media channels, increased satisfaction from our families as far as getting information from us in a timely manner, understanding what information is available. But I think a lot of times we stop there, and our kind of next phase really has to be making sure that our communication is received, right? It's one thing to be sending it out. And I always say in our classrooms, we're always checking for understanding. We would never think to not check for understanding. We have to do that with our communications as well. Right. Is the message being received the way we intended to be? Are the stories that our families are telling in coffee shops and in grocery stores and at the ball field, are those the stories we intend for them to tell about the way our school district makes them feel and the opportunities that are available? If we're not checking up on those things, then we're not really sure of our communication. And that's probably our next phase. We actually are just going to strategic planning again, and communication came up once again. And we realized maybe some of the tools we're using for communication are serving the needs of our pupils. We need to consider a change in communication tools, maybe for certain groups where more communication might be needed. I think we're probably not alone. A lot of times our elementary teachers are really good about communicating with families, between newsletters that are sent home, people with copies in folders and backpacks, and then the two-way communication, email or the school district's messaging platform. They feel very informed most of the time about what's going on with their students. As the students get over middle school and high school, that communication drops off. There are no people to go backpacks. We're not on social media telling those stories. Teachers have many more students, not 25 or 30 students per day. But I think back to when I was in the classroom, my last semester, I had 185 students per day. That is a completely different quality in communication. So communication is still needed, but maybe the strategies that those teachers are using to communicate 1 to 185 are a little different than 1 to 25 or 1 to 30, right? And making sure that parents know which avenues for those. Not every parent wants it. Some parents prefer it less.
Right.
Some parents prefer that, district app that you're using for communication. Some of them want a paper copy of whatever that announcement is. Yes. Don't want to go online. Some things might be housed on the website as far as like reaching plan and clear pathways. But again, are we really reaching all families if some of them don't have reliable internet? So how do we really wrap our arms around all of the communication that we're getting all those people? I think you put a lot out in that evidence. In so many different ways.
Right. And you make a good point about the teacher's role in this, because I think really I've been at central office, and sometimes I think we have more power than we do, and this is what I believe, that if something comes from central office, parents say, all right. If something comes from the building principal, they care a little more about it. But when it comes from that teacher, that's what they want to read. That's what they care about. And so I think it's so important to empower our teachers with some skills and tools, and maybe even communication pieces that they can put out, because really the teacher is the one the parents really trust at the end of the day. And what their story is the one that matters. I think especially now with the screen time issues that are going on, I think parents will listen to the teachers, and the teachers, what the story is that they tell is the one that's going to matter to parents. So I really believe we have to empower teachers to be good communicators. And I know they have a lot on their plate. I get that too. But
and I want also about empowering students. I mean, that's usually where it falls apart.
Yeah.
Because, you know, because we're talking about physical things, or even just anything happening in the classroom, it's either like 100% with kids or 0%, right?
Yeah.
But I think they are the powerful connector in all of this. You've been able to leverage, I mean, even like older kids doing, you know, even if it's one thing having communication to the parents, but then also just like public in general. I know, like, just seeing things on Instagram, it's always about when it's involving the students, that's when it's catching. Has that been part of your strategy at all?
Yeah, so at our middle school, we actually created a full meet class around digital media for students who are really interested in like communications, because so much of it does happen online these days. So great, but students are getting a little bit of photography lessons and practice because they're taking pictures for our middle school sports teams, right? So instead of having a local photographer come in, our students are getting practice taking those pictures. It costs a little less for our families to get those pictures. Our students are gaining valuable skills. And then they're working on, you know, we have at every level, elementary schools even, we have students announcements and news. And that doesn't just stay in their school building, but it goes on our district YouTube channel. It gets broadcast across our social media. And those are student driven. And I think about, you know, my own children being a part of that. Like one of my children loved being the producer of the news show. He did not want to be on the camera. He wanted to make the plan. He wanted to make sure that everyone knew what their role was and be in charge of that, and to have that creative vision for what it would look like in the end. I'm really good about making sure, like, we never retake that. That's not quite up to par. I have another child who thrives being in front of the camera. Let's be the anchor. He is the anchor.
That's so fun. That's terrific. I mean, that's really where you're going to get a lot of, you know, follows, views, but buy-in also. It's really transformative that way. Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that. There's so much that kids can learn from this, and they're so creative. So, and plus a lot that we can learn from them, because they tend to be involved in social media sometimes more than the adults are. And so they kind of know some of these things. So that's awesome. I love that.
That reminds me of a story when I was a superintendent. We had the kids doing, they would commentate on the ball games and we would stream. And the kids loved that. One of our biggest community things that the people loved was, for prom, we would have the promenade and we'd have announcers that would announce who the kids were, and we would stream that. So all the grandmas and the aunts and uncles could see all of the dresses and the boys in their tuxedos. And it was just a good community service kind of thing. You know, it doesn't always have to be information about the details, but the community loved that. They just loved watching those kids all dressed up and having a good time. Yeah. So there's so many ways that we can bring the kids in. And Jamie, that's such a great point about the kids being the connectors.
Yeah, they really are. They really are.
Tell us about your book. Who is the audience for your book? And
well, I wrote it as someone who's seeing the classroom level and what communication is like there, but as equally as applicable to a central office administrator, to a school principal. It is all of our responsibility as leaders, and teachers are leaders. They are, as you said, they're our biggest leaders. And part of this is helping make sure that that message is consistent and everyone knows, like, the messaging should be in line with your mission and your vision, and it should be celebratory most of the time. People really understand the mission and the vision. That's important. And then everyone can do their part. The central office can amplify the things coming out of the school buildings. The building principal and building staff can amplify what's going out from the classrooms. And teachers are doing a really great job of sharing those wins, those things that make parents know that their kids are cared for. how much effort does it take at a staff meeting to stand up the first 10 minutes and ask a few teachers to share? What are some of those great stories that you sent home? Now you as a building leader have access to all those stories. You can amplify them when appropriate. Sometimes they're private wins, and that's okay.
Yes.
But you can bring those private wins to your school building, the other teachers, as long as you're keeping FLIPA in mind. Help celebrate those and amplify them beyond your classroom. And a principal can do that. A principal can then bring those things to the central office. And part of that is having a communications coordinator now. She has to build that trust with teachers across all the buildings so that they'll invite her in to build trust with the principal. So they'll invite her in to share those great things. We don't at the central office necessarily always know when, you're going to have your parents in for donuts this morning, or when you're going to invite a mystery reader into your building. But those are wins that we can celebrate. You don't necessarily know your achievement schedule when, community members are planned to teach those life and economics lessons. Tell us. But also, it takes trust to invite someone that you don't know into your classroom to share those moments. And principals could help facilitate that. And she found our communications coordinator actually used to work on my team, and she ended up promoted over to that. So built her up, and then she flew away next door. So I'm so happy for her to grow into that. But when she had a few teachers brave enough to invite her in, then it spread like wildfire, right? Like she followed up with a nice note to them. Thank you for inviting me in. I read her in. It wasn't that bad. She sent me this nice note, and then I saw my story on the district social media channel. You could do that. I could do wildfire. And it brings those celebrations. It's hard work. Education is hard work. And it, in a lot of ways, elevates teachers just as much as it elevates our students and their achievement.
It does. It creates a culture where we're shining the light on what is right. And I think it does really create a culture where teachers want to get involved and show, look what I'm doing too. Look what our kids are doing in this classroom. And that's what we want to see. That is what we want to see.
That's terrific. So in your book, you're able to talk about amplifying what's happening within classrooms and schools and the district so that that culture is growing. There's pride. There's, people connecting and sharing and celebrating, but then bringing that outward too, so that the public, the community can celebrate those wins as well and be proud as well.
And things are going to happen, in school, like things happen in your school community that are beyond any one person's control. Sometimes people make poor decisions. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding. Sometimes there's a miscommunication.
Yeah.
And, some of the best school communicators I know have shared with me, the more you can build up that currency of trust by sharing all those wins in beginning, front loading that, building the relationships, building that trust. When something does happen, it's so much easier to deal with it, to communicate about it fairly and appropriately without using all of that past achievement. But if you start with no trust and then something like that happens, there's no reserves to pull from. So it's a continuous job to be building up that trust with your internal school community, teachers and support staff, but also the larger community. They're trusting us. They're sending their children, their most precious people in the world to us for a large part of the day. Someone's got to have that trust in advance. So when a misunderstanding or a misstep happens, it's not all gone.
As far as building the trust, I was watching the Mel Robbins podcast yesterday, and she had a Harvard professor on talking about how oversharing actually builds trust. And it helps people to create a better path in their profession, because when you share, even when it's a little negative, people see someone that is sincere and they start to trust you. And so that really ties into
Relatable.
what what you're talking about. How we're
And I
sharing.
told you, we're looking at potentially changing our education system because we took the feedback from our community that maybe it wasn't meeting all of our needs for some populations.
Right.
And if we do make that change, and when we do make that change, it'll be admitting like it wasn't perfect, it wasn't meeting our needs. And that's why, right? A big change for our parents and our school community who changed platforms like that. But clearly having the why and the data behind that should make that transition easier because we can read what we've heard what you said.
Yes.
We gathered the data, and here's why we're making this change. We don't make changes just because we like change, because trust me,
There's a lot of work behind that.
A lot of work behind every change we make. But I think that's part of that communication, explaining why a change happened. On a lot of times, we're so busy making the change happen in our school districts or in our classrooms that we're not being really transparent about the whys behind those changes or why those decisions are.
That's one of those little tweaks that make all the difference in the world. You're not going to have people storming in a board meeting because they want to know why this happened. They know, and it makes sense to them when you're able to be transparent and relay that. I mean, it's brilliant. Again, one of those things like, duh, right? But it's like we don't always do that. We kind of just like go about what we normally do without realizing like we are just one stakeholder in this whole entire community. So we need to make sure, even though the others may not be the decision makers, they still need to know the why behind we're doing things. Well, 90% of the time, be right on board anyway. So it's so true. And it's funny because do you remember we had Todd Rogers on our podcast, Jerry?
Yes.
He was one of the most popular ones we've had. He talked about the importance of communication with parents. He did a huge study on it through Harvard. And it's not only the methods, because that's, as you mentioned before, Chantell, all the different methods, either email or a newsletter or text or whatever it is. So those you have to be cognizant of. But also it's the messaging and how it's delivered as well. And there's a science behind it. So there are just so many different components to what we normally would think would be so easy is just, communication. It's not. There are so many different layers. There's so many different nuances. And it sounds like your book has brought all of those to life. So I don't know, Jerry, you have it. I don't have it yet. I can't wait. My husband's superintendent, so we'll dig into that.
Oh, he would love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one more point. With Todd Rogers, that was the first time I heard TLDR, too long didn't read.
Yeah.
And that's a critical piece. But I also know that technology companies are really understanding this. At our own company, ClassLink, we have given our parent portal a whole facelift.
Yeah.
We are working hard to be that partner for school districts to make it easier for the school districts to communicate with the parents. So
our public portal too.
Our public portal
all the tools, especially when we're talking about screen time now. Another important feature too. We don't normally talk about ClassLink on our podcast, but it's so relevant to what we're talking about here. Yeah.
Yes. And so Chantel, you are just ahead of the parade here.
Well, that's for the screen time today, right? There's so many misunderstandings because we just assumed that people thought computers in classrooms were going to be positive. And we didn't explain to regulate. We didn't explain our rollout plan. We didn't explain our ongoing professional learning. And for districts, we were very fortunate that we were already one-to-one and already had a big plan and had done virtual learning for whether before COVID. But for districts, this is COVID-driven. Like there was a necessity, but there wasn't necessarily a. So I think we're seeing that now that parents are demanding transparency, and school districts need transparency from their partners so that they can then pass that along to their community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this book is a treasure trove. of good information. And I wanted to say, too, I believe Chantel might be with us at our Women in Tech conference talking about her book this year.
Right.
So
That's right.
I did see her present at ERDI, and she did a great job of facilitating communication conversations with us. So looking forward to that as well. So Chantel, where can people find your book?
It's available on Amazon, so it's available for Kindle or the physical copy. We have Jerri and appreciate anyone who would want to check it out. It's written to be practical with things that you can implement individually and especially with your team, whether you're at a school building with your leadership team or if you're at a district office. Every chapter has team activities because communication is not one person's job, even if there's a communications director or four.
Yes. Love it. Love it. Brilliant. And the gift. I mean, really, it sounds like a game changer to me. So it's so nice that you obviously were able to make these connections and implement this in your district. But it was so great that you spent the time to put it together so that others can leverage and take advantage of it.
Yes, so important. And I bet your district appreciated this so much. I can't imagine how valuable it must be to them to have all this research.
Absolutely.
Well, Chantel, we better let you get back to work.
That's right. Summer's busy.
I know. Well, thank you for taking this hour to be with us today. It's always a pleasure to see you. And I think we'll all see each other in a few weeks at ISTE, which is exciting. Yes. And Chantel, did you say you are presenting at ISTE?
So I'm going to be for a panel on Wednesday about AI and trust through the 2K through 20. So
excellent.
Yeah.
That's great. What a great
We'll be there.
Yes.
We'll be there when you're on.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.